We didn't have any support vehicles or plans of where we were going to stay. So we just kind of picked up and had some money and some cell phones with us and just kind of went for 3 days. And it was, to see everything that you thought you knew from a different perspective was quite amazing. And to do it with some of your best friends was really, really cool.
Thanks, Kyle. And I'm just letting everyone know that I am recording this meeting. It will go up on our website. Amanda, go ahead.
There, I have a similar story to Kyle, I guess, back in, 2004 or something. I rode from Norfolk to Washington, D.C. as part of the DC AIDS ride. So it was like a awareness fundraising ride, which was really fun, and just got to see so many places in Virginia that I'd never seen before. Met some new friends along the way, and it was just really a great time. And it also was probably the first time where I really learned, as part of the training for that, there were a lot of supported rides and a lot of great mentorship that happened with trying to learn how to ride properly on the road and with groups and things like that. And so it was just really great experience.
Thanks, Amanda. Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Pennington. I am also with the TJPDC. I am the program manager for the rideshare program, which promotes alternative forms of transportation throughout the state. So as a non-cyclist, probably one of my favorite bike memories is when I remember as a kid, I think I was about 8, and I got a bike for Christmas, which was a really big deal. It was like my first big girl bike, and it was so cold that day. But when you get a bike for Christmas, you have to go ride it. And I remember like bundling up in all of the winter wear. Luckily, there was no snow in Kentucky at the time, so it was good. And like just riding up and down the street for what felt like hours. It might not have been because it was so cold, but I remember my mom, standing there watching, just being like, could you stop? I'm freezing to death. But I had to enjoy that awesome new Christmas gift. So that's my favorite bike memory.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. Kath Welch, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I have no official capacity here. I've done the bike ped count a couple of times. And my all-time favorite bike experience was about 3 years ago. I went on a tandem bike ride with my son. That's the way for somebody of a certain age to ride a bike. No, I ride myself. But anyway, we went on a 6-day trip around in Northern California, around the Napa Valley. And he really, really, really pushed me. And I wasn't sure I was going to be able to really do it, but knowing that he was on the front there just in case helped a lot. But I felt it was the best way to travel with someone ever, because the guy, he's captive there, which you have young kids, you don't know what this is like yet, but he was captive. So he had to be there with me. And you can talk. If you're on 2 bikes, you can't really talk. If you're on the 1 bike, you can. It just was a wonderful, really wonderful experience. I hope to do it again, going out there again next month, finally, after not seeing him for a year. And I'm really all over the tandem thing. I just think it's the greatest way to travel.
Sounds like fun. Thank you for sharing. Peter Olms.
I'm Peter Olms. I'm with the VDOT Research Division. And I will kind of go back to the most embarrassing bike memory, a little bit like Peter Krebs. When I was a kid, I was biking on a paved trail and went over the handlebars and got a nice scratch on my elbow. And from then on, I've worn a helmet and checked that the brake on the front wheel is fully attached, because when it went around, it locked that front wheel and was the cause of that fun.
Thanks, Peter. Lonnie, now that you're up to speed, would you like to introduce yourself and share a favorite bike?
Yeah. So my name's Lonnie Murray, and I'm a past member, not current member of the Charleston Track Club, and have done several marathons and 10-miler programs. I'd say my favorite memory was probably running with the Western Albemarle cross country team. We did a run. We'd start at Coach Bain's house in Crozet and then run up German's Gap all the way to the Parkway. And that was only seniors did that run. And it was a painful, torturous run, but it was awesome.
Great, thanks, Lonnie. Michael Geisert.
Hi, I'm Michael Geisert. I'm just a bike advocate, live up in Carsbrook, and Kath rides by my house all the time, so that's nice. And my favorite memory is one of the times I rode cross country from Cleveland to the East Coast. I stopped in the Finger Lakes area and was just looking at this lake, and this guy came out of the house and was like, "You need a place to stay overnight?" It's like, "Yeah." "Well, I can't let you in, but you can put your tent on my yard." That's great. So that was great. And then in the morning, he came out and said, "Do you want to ride across the lake?" I'm like, "Okay." So I put my bike in his boat, and we go across the lake in his boat. It's like, man, that was great. So back in the 70s. Thanks.
Thanks, Michael. Michael Barnes.
Good morning, everybody. Michael Barnes. I work with VDOT, helping localities spend the money that we have to build bike facilities. My favorite memory, and probably what animates me so much about this stuff is I lived in Boston when I was a little kid, first, second grade, and it was great. It was near the Olmsted's Emerald Necklace. And what was amazing was I could head out my back door, cross a busy street, but then get on a bike path and ride for miles within the city of Boston. And wouldn't that be a nice dream to have here?
Thanks, Michael. Shane.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Shane Sawyer with the Virginia Department of Transportation Central Office. Let's see, a favorite bike memory would be in another lifetime as a Peace Corps volunteer in Tanzania. A bicycle was my only means of transportation for 27 months, and there's an endless supply of unpaved roads in Tanzania. So you could ride in any direction for days, and it was a great time.
Great, thanks, Shane. Chuck. Chuck, are you there? If not, did I miss anybody? I have a big question mark in my brain if Dan or Tim has introduced themselves. Oh,
I
Chuck.
unclicked. I'm here.
Okay, great.
Yeah, this is Chuck. I'm the Culpeper District VDOT representative. And mine's hiking. I do a lot of hiking up in the Northern Virginia area. And it's probably hiking on the C&O Canal in the Maryland side, going out to see Great Falls from that side of the river, because I live in Virginia and I go out to the Great Falls side on the Virginia side, and seeing all the restoration work that's going along on the C&O Canal. I remember when I was a kid, we went on a bike trip up that corridor after Hurricane Agnes went through, and it was totally destroyed. And to see how it's rejuvenated and revived, and they're restoring some of the ferry boats that they used to run up and down the corridor, and they're establishing the locks and all that stuff. And that was really exciting to go out there and look at the historic area while you're hiking down the trail. It was really, really a good experience.
Great, thanks, Chuck. Did I miss anybody? No. Okay. So we're gonna, I think it's nice that you were all able to share something special about biking and walking. I think it's fun to remember all of the good stuff, in addition to thinking about infrastructure and bike counts and all the other things. So I'm gonna quick share my screen. Let's see here. So this was our agenda for today, and just based on who has to leave early and who can, who's showing up late, we're going to kind of go in a different order. So we're going to start with, we'll just jump ahead, the bike and pedestrian count. So yeah, we are up to the spring count already. That count is going to run from Tuesday, April 20th and conclude on Thursday, April 29th. We'd like to do the counts on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. So we'll have 6 days total to do those counts in either week. The morning counts are going to be from 7 to 9 a.m. The evening counts are going to be from 4 to 6 p.m., just as they were back in the fall. We'll do 1 morning and 1 evening count for each location. With the fall, we had plenty of volunteers who agreed to do those counts, but we did not have anybody sign up for weekend counts. If we get more volunteers for the weekend, we'll add in weekend counts this time around, and they'll be at the same locations. So there were 10 locations we went to last time. And if you're curious what those look, Shane, go ahead.
I was going to ask Jessica, do you have a list of those? I know in the past there's a list, but it'd be great to refresh everyone's memory if possible.
Yeah, so I have that just in case somebody asked it. I didn't write them out nicely. This is just directly pulled from our summary Excel spreadsheet that is up on our website. But those locations are Riverview Park, Emmett and Angus, which is, near that Emmett 29 area, the James Warner Parkway and Rio Road, Monticello and 6th, the intersection of Rio Road and Penn Park Road, the intersection of Ridge and Main, the intersection of Market and 9th, the intersection of Emmett and Ivy, the intersection of 5th Street and Old Lynchburg. And that's kind of a weird one, but that's the accurate way of describing it, I guess. And then the intersection of Preston, Grady, and 10th. And we worked with Amanda to figure out exactly what it is we wanted to count, because otherwise it's too much to try to count all of those little intersection areas. So there's a very clear plan for how to count that one. Does that answer your question, Shane? I know it would be better if we had it all on a map, but I just didn't have time to pull that together. Oops.
Oh, no, that's fine. The list will work. No problem.
Great. And Shane, oh, go ahead.
Is this exclusively locations within the city of Charlottesville? Or, I guess some of these are in Albemarle County, but yep. Have you ever considered adding any rural locations like Dick Woods Road or Ridge Road?
That's a great question. So basically we stuck with Charlottesville and Albemarle because that is the staff that we have represented on this committee. So that's just the historical reason for it. We can look into the rural areas in the future, but we just haven't done it yet.
Particularly Ridge Road if you drive past there on any Saturday, like the side of the road is full of vehicles. And same thing with Dick Woods Road on a Saturday. And it's a mix of bicycles and runners, and walkers.
Oh, great. Yeah, no, that's really useful information, and we'll look at it for the future. Let's see here. Okay. So I am now making a call for volunteers for the spring bicycle and pedestrian count. What I will do, last time we had a ton of help from Peter Krebs at PEC. He sent out an email requesting volunteers, and that's where I got quite a few people from. So what I'm going to do is create an email template calling for volunteers. I will already have the training video for how to do the count up on YouTube, and I'll include a link in that email template, and then I'll send it out to all of the staff in this meeting and any members of the public who are interested. And then you can share it with your networks, and hopefully we can get all the volunteers we need again. Are there any questions about the bike and ped count? Cool. Okay.
Jessica, what's your deadline for sign up of volunteers?
I would love people to sign up as early as possible, as early as they can commit. But like last time, I was taking more volunteers all the way up through the last day of counting. So great. Okay. The next thing I'd like to do is talk about the one map update. So Dan, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And maybe you want to give an update for what you and Brian have been working on.
Sure. I'll start with just some general background for anybody new. The One Map is a regional effort from the recent bicycle pedestrian plan adopted by the city, the county, and with UVA. And it just shows regional network of proposed connections, our existing infrastructure. It has more of the urban focus on it for transportation. But we do have rural recommendations, and this One Map initiative is to really get these recommendations into an online, user-friendly, accessible resource, and as a planning tool to show our proposed route, but also as for the public to see our existing infrastructure. And so this has been in the works, really starting once the plan was adopted in 2019, and trying to build the data structure. And so yeah, we're 3 entities working on this. And then last year, I think it didn't gain much traction with everything that's been going on. And so we're really aiming to get this probably accessible and ready in the summer. We've been doing a lot more like data, looking at the data and the merging. Early stages of efforts were more focused on compiling this data and making sure it's what we want to represent. So working with the county GIS person, he's not here, but we're noticed when the city and UVA provided all this data that we still have some minor tweaks, some minor homework to do. We're going to be meeting next week. We still have to find that date. But some issues that we're finding is not everything has the domain structure that we need for things to merge easily. Some domains that we requested early on for attribute fields, and just some naming of what the facilities are themselves. So these are really minor updates, but we do need to address these. And then once we're able to get those addressed, we're going to be able to look at this data merged as one whole structure and being able to start the end steps towards this. So again, that's a general overview of where we're at. There's some minor tweaks, some homework left, but this is going to be usable for us, and I'm hoping by the summer. But that's in collaboration with those involved here, with the city and UVA. So if there's, yeah.
Hey, Jessica.
Yeah.
I just had a question. Are you going to be able to look at prioritizing the needs for the network is the long-term goal, so we can identify a prioritized list of projects that we could push forward for investment and construction? It'd be good to have that as the end goal, so we have this map that we can use to overlay the data that you're collecting and put that to use as a tool for evaluating where we have our needs throughout the community.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Chuck. I think that we're at a stage, and Dan and anyone else, correct me if I'm wrong, we just need to get the map put together. And from there, there's so many things we can do with it, including what you just described, using it to help prioritize upcoming projects and future projects. So I think we're just at a stage where we just need to get it all together, get it up and running. We have, as Dan described, the staff have a little bit of homework to do. And then what we talked about last time, and Bill, you can jump in, UVA is going to take over a little bit of the hosting work early on to take all of the data that the staff have worked on and turn it into a usable map. So initially it'll be something that the public can also take a look at and plan their own routes. Bill, is there anything more you wanted to say about the work that UVA is going to be doing?
Yeah, we've been talking to the Scholars Lab folks, Chris Gist and Drew McQueen, who are also avid cyclists, thankfully, which is good. And they have a lot of experience in this ArcGIS online world where that's the way that we present this data to the public and come up with different ways of using it. So they're probably going to be able to help us with that, whether it's hosted through UVA or probably more likely hosted through the TJPDC. We're not, sure what will work best there, but we know that they can, give us the technical expertise that that we will need to get it to that, once we have the data, to get it to a place where we can present it to the public in a rational way. So.
That's good. And Bill, it'd be good to keep them, kind of get them start involved with our meetings, and I could see us probably handing off, within
yeah,
to be able to get their involvement with that. And like Chuck said, once we have this hosted, then we'll be able to start doing the analysis that Chuck's talking about, looking at VTrans data, compiling, just evaluating for the county. We're going to look at, paving data and the bridge data for us to kind of look at what, these locations of our bicycle pedestrian infrastructure with what VDOT is evaluating and how we can involve some improvements within that.
Great. Are there any other questions from other staff or from the public?
I have a couple of comments. Looking through the data, I've noted that it appears that the data has been digitized in several different ways, which is presenting some problems. For instance, some of the features are hung from the center line, which is great, but then you got other features that are basically, you got the bike lane mapped where it is on the either side of the road. So again, there's a lot of inconsistencies, and also some of the lines are broken at intersections, some aren't. There's the attribute names. There's like 5 different types of bike lane is spelled like 5 different ways. And it's just little things like that need some attention to clean up. But before you start doing a whole lot more, I think some basic decisions have to be made. Are you going to hang it from the center line, or are you going to break at intersections, or what are you going to call a bike lane? Again, it's there's just a lot of, it basically looks like 3 separate entities did the mapping, and then you're trying to put it together, which I think might be the case, but there's definitely some inconsistencies across the map.
Well, yeah, I definitely agree. Just evaluating all 3 of the layers. These decisions were decided when we started this process, but I'm sure through the transition of a lot of people involved and just kind of the extension of this project, we're bound to have definitely some upkeep with that and correction. And, it might need to be a refresher, but that's what we're going to be. That's very specific details that you just called out is what we're going to be the homework that we have to address. Like I said, because this is kind of extended, and but we did iron out what we want this data structure to look like, and we also are coming from 3 different entities that already had their data set up a certain way, so we're also trying to collaborate internally as we're trying to collaborate regionally. So I definitely agree with what you said.
And can I suggest one other thing? It's Mike Barnes, and that would be once we do have some of the attributing data sort of ironed out, maybe creating like a small team of folks who can go, break the development areas up, some of the places where a lot more density of trails, and maybe focus on like the south side of town, the west side of town itself, and just kind of break them into small analytic zones, and where we can go through with a small team and actually do some QA/QC and try and find some of the stuff. I think my experience is, you really got the devil's in the details. We're not that big of a community. Many of us know it quite intimately, and that type of exercise might be a great way to clean up some of the data. And it may be bringing in some people who have some more expertise for the data than being experts at GIS. might ultimately at least be a serve us well for making sure we get a really good, clean data set.
Thanks, Michael. And Dan or Bill, if you guys want to jump in. So Michael, it sounds like what you're describing is some ground truthing that would happen. I still think that the cleanup work that Dan and Bill have described is something that would have to happen first. Just brainstorming the kind of ground truthing that you're describing, it definitely sounds like it could be a fun volunteer project. But again, we just need to get the basics in place and make sure it's a map we can all look at and that makes sense. And then we'll do that ground truthing to ensure that it accurately do that quality control to make sure it reflects what's actually on the ground. Amanda, you were gonna, go ahead, Michael.
Just real quick, if you don't mind, I completely agree with you, Jessica, that the cleaning up the data is something that needs to happen first. And no, I was not meaning physically going out in the field. I think a lot of stuff is done virtually. Combination of, if we have to, Google Maps, but I think most of the stuff can just be done with some folks looking at the line work and making some calls on that data. I think we're going to have to get to that level to really get a good, clean set of data.
Sounds good. Thanks, Michael. Amanda, you were going to say something.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to go back to some of Shane's comments. So you mentioned like whether or not it's using centerline data and breaking at intersections. And I think you mentioned one other thing. I'm curious if VDOT has kind of a protocol for how their data is, because I think, all of our data should be working together. And if we need to make some calls about how that is structured, it would be helpful, if you already have a standard and a protocol, we could follow that so that we're all the data is working together.
Yeah, Amanda, that's a good suggestion. We do have a protocol that we use when we're developing a statewide inventory, and we ran into the same issue. We collected data from numerous regional agencies, localities, and none of it was mapped the same. So we took the data and basically said, this is how we're going to do it. And we have to do some redigitizing, but it is at least now is consistent. So yeah, I could definitely share that information. And again, I'm not saying that the way we're doing it is right. I'm just saying we are trying to be consistent across all of the mapping that we do. And also by hanging rows, things from the center line, if you want to do some type of analysis, I think it'll be a lot easier that way versus having these lines that are floating on the side of the road and not attached to anything necessarily. So I can definitely provide some, at least what we are doing, being VDOT.
I think that would be really helpful. Thank you, Shane.
Yeah, so Shane, if there's anything you want to send me to share with the work group, we can do that. But also, Dan, if you want to extend an invitation to Shane for that work group meeting next week, I think that would be helpful. Any other comments or questions?
Hey, Shane, I was going to comment. You might want to reach out to Geraldine because she's in charge of the Pathways for Planning project, and they're doing a lot of that stuff. She might be able to attend one of the meetings and do a quick presentation and present a lot of that material that they're looking for on the data sets and how they are incorporating them into the state system.
Yeah, Chuck, that is a great idea because we are sending all of our data is going to be housed in Pathways for Planning. So yeah, that's a great idea. And also the other layers that would be needed for analysis are there, such as the 6-year, improvement plan. You got smart scale projects that are funded. You got the tier 1 VTrans needs. So all of these data layers are there that we could put on one, overlay on the one map to do the analysis once one map is in, where it needs to be. But Chuck, that's actually a great idea.
Yeah, and the other thing I was going to say is that's an external web-based mapping tool that anybody can get access to. You just have to register and get access to it. So once that's incorporated, and it includes all the other data sets, the crash data, the safety data, like Shane said, the VTrans data that's available. So you can get a lot more information in addition to just the bike ped information. But once it's all integrated, you could look at the key locations where a project might make the most sense and have the biggest bang for the buck.
So I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Lonnie.
Yeah, so in the past, a lot of this data has really excluded runners. What's being done to make sure that data about pedestrian traffic also includes data about routes and areas used by runners?
So staff, I'll let you guys jump in, but in short, the one map is supposed to include bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. You guys will have to jump in and say if it includes like off-road trails and stuff like that.
I thought it did. I thought we had like a category in there for like Class B trail or something like that. That would be, but it's not like, it doesn't say like this facility is for runners or walkers. It's more of just the type of facility that it is. So if it's a pedestrian facility or a trail facility, I mean, you could assume it could be used for running or a multi-use trail.
I mean, there's a lot of things like, for example, gravel roads that serve as de facto trails and are highly used because they're lower speeds and are, you know, are better places for running.
I think that's a great point, and I think it probably segues into this conversation about quiet routes and all that. That I think would maybe be more of the next step with this data set, because this is strictly like infrastructure that is designed for that purpose of bike ped versus something like a quiet route, which is not designated as, you know, doesn't have bike. It doesn't have like, it's just not heavily trafficked. So, you know, it's not like it's set up specifically for biking or running. Or walking. It just happens to be a good route to use.
I mean, in many cases, it's a, well, yeah, I'll save comments then for that.
Great, thanks. Any other questions about one map? Okay.
I just a few last points is yes. I definitely am fully aware with where with what you're bringing up, Lonnie, and you know, that's data, VDOT's unpaved roads data that we could bring in and evaluate as well. The initial scope of this one map was a transportation network, and it was decided to bring in existing trails data. We're talking like within the park systems and greenways, you know, linear parks. But just mention something with what Shane says, you know, we have to look into the scope, you know, of how much we're going to take a step back and have to reevaluate this whole data structure. We, you know, looking at, do we put, I think recalling initial discussions in the way that I believe that the county took was existing infrastructure has, even if it's a bike lane on both sides of the road, we decided to count that as, so we could evaluate linear miles of infrastructure. But we're also, unlike the I believe the Virginia Interactive Bike Web map, we're having also half of our data set is for proposed routes as well. I don't know if VDOT is portraying proposed routes. And so that does take more of the center line aspect to this data. And so we're balancing a lot within this one map in itself. And we just decided to include shared use paths, trails, bicycle infrastructure, and pedestrian infrastructure to be included in all of this within the three entities. So, you know, we also do call out rural areas that is known for bicycle use. But again, a lot of the focus was a regional connection in the development to the city.
I mean, I think to what you're saying, I mean, there are places, for example, like I live in Sugar Hollow. It's not wasn't created as a greenway, but it is a de facto greenway. The length of Sugar Hollow Road on any given Saturday is highly used by runners and cyclists. And so it's not, no one planned to build the infrastructure to make that a greenway, but it is a greenway. And so in terms of planning and for VDOT and other organizations, that needs to be taken into account as improvements are made. Same thing would go for roads like DECA, Ridge Road, and other highly used existing places in the county that are de facto greenways. I feel like some of those are very poorly documented right now, and that has negative impacts.
This has a lot to do with our discussion yesterday with the rural rustic pavings. And, I definitely agree. But also on our end, I don't know if the county's at that point of promoting these roads as specifically, a greenway. I think we can get to the point of saying we feel there are users here and what accommodations can be made. And we could have those conversations with VDOT. I think that's the level that we're at right now.
Yeah, and I put in the chat bar a link to the interactive bicycle map that, well, a couple of them. One is our inventory, but one is the actual interactive bicycling map that you can actually click on. And I guess this relates to the low stress conversation as well, but you can actually click a toggle on unpaved roads, traffic volumes for each road, the facility type. So again, you could use that map to, I guess, find the low traffic volume roads that if you want to travel those, you can find the unpaved, the gravel roads if you want to find those. So it might be a resource for helping folks find areas to bike or a walk that have less traffic.
Thanks for putting that in the chat, Shane. Any other questions, comments? Great. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again so that we can talk about low stress routes. And I'll preface this conversation by saying that this is really just the beginning of a conversation. This is just something to put on your radar. It's one of the many things that we can do with one map once we get a map in place. It's not something that we have to do, but I think that there's a lot of value to it. So just to give you a little bit of background on why we're bringing this up now. And Patrick, I see that you've joined us, and I'm probably going to call on you to help me introduce this a little bit. So just giving you a heads up. So a big thank you to Peter and PEC for hosting that Active Mobility Summit a couple weeks ago now. And let's see, at that summit, I ended up in a breakout room with a couple of other really great folks who were talking about low stress route maps for biking and walking too. One of the people in that group was Becca White from University Transportation, and she was particularly interested in a low stress map for the university area. So we were talking a little bit more about how one map might complement that work. But Patrick, I want to give you a chance to speak for Becca and for the university about what your interest is and why you guys are interested in a low stress map for that area.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. So my name is Patrick Clark. I'm from UVA's Department of Parking and Transportation, and I oversee all of our alternative transportation offerings. So the university, we have a bike map currently, if you're familiar with it. It was designed to be used by everyone, but it's clearly made by planners. And so we're concerned about how user friendly that map is. And then couple that with, you may or may not also be aware that due to COVID, our transit system changed many of its bus routes. And post-COVID, we don't anticipate those routes going back to normal. And there's been a philosophy shift accompanying that, the idea of eliminating convenience trips and more facilitating commuting trips, just getting people to and from grounds, but not necessarily helping them get to different areas of grounds, kind of cutting out those trips where possible. As a result, we anticipate an increase in micromobility use, chiefly bicycles. And then with that, a lot of, we expect and would welcome a lot of new bicycle riders. But there are certain obstacles to overcome. One of those being we want to help them be familiar with the best way to traverse grounds. And so identifying quiet routes. So that kind of led into this conversation. So I'm just learning about one map, but our interest is identifying those quiet routes and then how those connect or interconnect with the city and the county.
Great. Thanks for that introduction, Patrick. Just for the public, because I know staff already knows this, the benefits of low stress route maps are that it provides people who are already biking with safer and lower stress routes. It provides people who are not comfortable biking on the routes they know from driving to find lower stress routes. And like any map, it would help us see things from an equity standpoint. Where are there lower stress routes and where is there a paucity of lower stress routes, and how can we make it more equitable in how those routes are distributed through our community? So
yeah, I mean, I could
ahead.
add to Patrick a little bit, because I worked a lot on developing that map in the past, and it really goes back a long way. The original iteration of it was probably 15 years ago, and yeah, Patrick's right. It was like a two-sided map, bike on one side, bus on the other, and it was really designed to be printed and given out to students as kind of a, not given to them in orientation, but available to them as they kind of went to some of the orienting activities on grounds for the first time. And so, yeah, it's evolved, but it's never evolved to that point where we've put it online and it's dynamic at all. So just kind of leave it there. So I feel like now we're maybe talking about, especially as we have the one map data coming online, that there might be a way of, expanding on what we've done in the past on it.
Great, thanks, Bill. So like I said, this is just like an intro to what should be an ongoing conversation. And what I've done is just pull a couple of examples that I'm familiar with. If those of you who have heard me talk about it before, I moved here from Arizona. So these are some Arizona examples. These are not, the only examples. They're just examples I'm familiar with and could pull quickly. And I think more so than looking at maps at this point, it's important to look at the keys to those maps. And that's because in order to move forward with any piling on or layering on any low stress routes onto the existing one map is going to require some definitions. We're going to have to figure out what exactly a low stress route means for our community. And maybe that looks different in the university area versus the city versus the county versus rural areas. So I think having a sense of what other communities are doing with their maps and how they're defining low stress routes can be helpful. So these are really just here for you guys to take a look at. I'm not a Zoom expert, so I'm going to try to share this. Is everyone seeing a map? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So this is just an example. Since this conversation is initially spearheaded by the university, I'm showing a university map. What they ended up doing was creating a definition for a bicycle-friendly street. Those are in blue. These are streets that have vehicles running on them, but they meet certain limits of having so many vehicles per day, and the speed limits are pretty low on those roadways. So that's how they're identified as bike-friendly streets. There's no signage on those streets to identify them as bike-friendly. It's just that they met a definition and they're highlighted on the university map. There are also shared use bike paths. Those are a little bit obvious, or a little bit more obvious because they're, clearly created for bicyclists and pedestrians, and those are identified here in green. And then there's pedestrian walkways. So I don't know about UVA, but at this university, there were shared use paths that, because of incredibly high numbers of pedestrian traffic, they were banned, bikes were banned from those areas. So those are identified in yellow. And then there's all this cross-hatching Yeah.
We have similar UVA with dismount only areas.
Yeah, and I think from a university standpoint, those are often really important to highlight because enforcement can only go so far. You have to educate people to let them know where they should and should not be riding. And then low stress maps, I think, also really benefit from having additional information for bicyclists. So this map includes things like where you can get bike parking, where you can get your bike repaired. It also considers how people are traveling beyond the university area. So people might feel really comfortable biking around the university, but if they're coming to the university and this is like their first time on a bike since they were 12, they might not feel comfortable biking beyond the university environment. So this map is also thinking about how are people connecting to other transportation options. So there was a streetcar there, so they had the links, or they had the stops identified as well on this map. So that's just an example. I just wanted to put it out there so that people start thinking about this as one way we can move forward with the one map. And I want to open it up for comments or questions. I don't want to stick on this topic too long. I want in a few minutes to switch over to our conversation about Bike Month.
Okay, I have
yeah.
a quick comment. I love this. I am so tired of trying to figure this out on my own. You get to a place, oh, bike lane ends. You get to someplace else. It's just so aggravating and frustrating. I welcome this so wholeheartedly. If there's anything I can do to help, including going out there and finding out what all the problems are, count me in. I really think this is an important thing to do.
Great. Thanks for your enthusiasm, Kath.
I
just have
were you going
one
to say something?
quick. I have one quick comment, and it's more about how those safe streets were kind of determined, like those blue routes that were on there. You said it was based off of speed and traffic volume and all that. I just kind of went through a similar process with making these walk to school transit style maps, and we kind of, it was kind of a mad dash, last minute kind of thing because of COVID and things like that. So we weren't able to really kind of poll the masses on how we should calculate those safe streets. And once we tried to collect all the information, and once we published it, we got a lot of feedback on like, hey, this is not a safe street. This is not the route that we use, even though this street does have two sidewalks on either side and crosswalks and it checks all these boxes, but we go this other way because of like crime or something like that. So I just kind of want to throw a word of caution out there about how safe routes are actually determined.
No, that's a great point. And I can say we did not do that for the university map that I showed you. For the city map, we definitely did a lot more work about those definitions. So one of the things that we talked about with the city map creation was this invisible information that you're talking about. Like there can be something, a route that meets a particular planning definition for being a bike friendly route or a safer route. And that doesn't meet people's real lived experiences, whether it's crime or like a rogue dog in the neighborhood. There's lots of that kind of information that we can only get through interacting with people. So I'm definitely hearing you and just seconding what you have to say. Bill, and then I think Max had his hand up.
Oh no, I just think Kyle and Kath, I think those are great comments. I think going forward, obviously we probably want to look at this as more of a online tool. I don't know, maybe paper maps are still useful for some, but I think generally the online dynamic aspect is the way to go. And so then, both the map that you showed and the map that we created were heavily edited in design and Illustrator. So I think the cartography, has to fit the technology. But Kyle, the safe routes to school aspect is really yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but that could be a good model. And I do think there needs to be a lot of group think about about how we define these. It's safety, it's steepness. There's all kinds of different factors at play in Charlottesville, as we know. But I'll leave it. Thanks.
Max, did you want to go ahead? Do you have something?
Yeah, I don't know if it's really helpful because it pertains mostly to on-street biking. But if we talk about streets where it's okay to bike on the street, and then sometimes you run into intersections with smart traffic signals that don't recognize you as a bicyclist, and you have to wait for cars behind you to come close enough so that the signal can see either of you. If it's possible to highlight these as kind of flag them basically as problem areas so that people aren't stranded there. I know it's probably even legal to go, at least where I lived before in Minnesota, it was legal. They said in the code, after a reasonable amount of time, if you wait and the signal doesn't react, but it's not safe. So it's just something maybe we can, I hope there are not too many of these signals, but yeah.
No, that's a great point, Max. And I'll just really quickly point out on the city map, there was, they had little icons for every push button crossing. So this recognition that if you're going to be going on less busy routes or less busy roadways as a bicyclist to stay on a low stress route, you're often going to come to an intersection with a busier street. And there may not be a traffic signal at all to try to get you across that. So these icons were there specifically to indicate places that were the only places where you could safely cross a busier road by using these lower stress routes. So yes, recognizing that is a really great point. And then Lonnie, go ahead.
Hi, I posted a screenshot. Hopefully I posted the right one. Strava and Garmin all collect data on activity. And I've wondered if you've considered using some of the heat map data. I mean, just scanning what I've seen is pretty accurate in terms of the usage of a lot of areas. And people do tend to gravitate, you have enough people out there running and cycling and walking, and they gravitate towards the easiest places to run, walk, or bike. So it seems like integrating that data of where people are already using, the places people are already using, seems like a logical thing to do.
Good point. And I think that from what I've heard from Lonnie, can I ask you to mute yourself when you're not talking? Otherwise I get a ton of feedback. Thank you so much. Yes, I think that the locality staff has repeatedly expressed a lot of interest in using Strava and all of the great data that offers. I personally am a little bit more skeptical. I think that low stress routes in particular are meant to reach out to people who don't feel comfortable biking yet, no matter what. So it needs to be, I think that there's a balance with using that kind of data from people who feel comfortable getting out on a lot of different roadway types, and also hearing some of that invisible information from community members who just don't feel comfortable yet in any situation. So unless there's anything else, I want to wrap that up so we can get to our discussion about Bike Month.
I just had one more quick comment, which is there's a huge problem with obesity in rural areas. That's pretty well known. And for people in rural areas, it's because we don't have bike lanes, we don't have sidewalks. It's very important to have access to areas where you can safely exercise. So I would just encourage consideration of that in terms of places that are convenient for rural people to access and exercise.
Great point. Thank you. All right.
I was just going to mention,
go ahead, Amanda.
We did do some analysis with the Bike Fed master plan, identifying levels of traffic stress. So there is kind of at least some base information that has done that sort of, methodical analysis of the different roads, taking into account traffic volumes and speed and unsignalized crossings and things like that. It's imperfect, but it could at least provide a starting point for ruling out those areas that maybe they do have bike lanes, but because of the traffic volume and some other factors might not be a low stress route. So just pointing that out as a resource as we move forward.
Great, thank you.
I just wanted to add one last thing to that too, is
Go ahead.
early state in our development of the one map data, we definitely worked with this PDC on the screenshot that you provided was a tool that we use to kind of just for the rural areas, see where people are riding. It's not the most accurate, but it was a starting point for us to gather that type of information. And it is included. I looked, Sugar Hollow is included as some type of proposal for accommodating bicyclists on this location. And we have a lot of other areas in the rural area of the county for Albemarle County. So that was analyzed, but again, we couldn't put every rural road out there and we didn't identify yet at this point what's paved, what's not paved. We just kind of emphasized, we see that people are using these roads.
Well, I'm really excited that so many of you had so much to add to that conversation. And I think it's something that we'll come back to again, as we get a little farther with one map. All right, Amanda, I'm going to pick on you if you want to introduce a little bit more about Bike Month, which is coming up in May. And I thought what we would do after Amanda gives us a little introduction is we will do a roundtable of things that different people are planning and then try to identify opportunities for collaboration. One other thing I want to note is normally this meeting goes until noon, but we're sharing a Zoom account with the housing people at the PDC and they are running an event at noon today. So we need to actually end it by 11:35 as a hard stop. So just letting everyone know.
Awesome. Yeah, as Jessica mentioned, May is Bike Month. And so we kicked off our planning at the Active Mobility Summit a couple of weeks ago. We had a follow-up meeting last week with a few people who are interested in kind of helping to organize events and put some energy towards promotion and organizing events and things like that. Bike Month really is a celebration of all of the great things that so many people are doing in our community, and it comes together from a variety of different ways. The city tends to take the lead on putting together a calendar and promoting stuff, organizing people where we need to, but we really rely on all of the community partners working in biking in the region to help fill out those events, because people are doing a lot of things, and so this is just kind of a way to collectively share and celebrate how we can enjoy biking more, learn more about bike safety and maintenance, and just promote cycling as a safe transportation and recreational activity. So we have a good list of things that we're doing, things that are kind of nationally recognized are Bike to School Day and Bike to Work Day and Mother's Day rides and rides of silence and things like that. So we've got a pretty good start. So I think that's kind of it as far as an introduction. I guess in terms of the roundtable, some of those folks that were on the call could speak up about the things that they had volunteered to organize and promote. And certainly we are open to whatever ideas anybody has. And if you know of events that are going on, as part of a club or, a local business that you frequent, please do let us know so that we can get the word out about those different activities.
Amanda, did you want to talk about a couple of the activities that you guys are doing? Maybe Kyle wants to jump into and talk about what Safe Routes to School is doing to cover the city stuff.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with Bike to Work Day and then we'll turn it over to Kyle. That is kind of one of those signature events, and obviously people are doing things differently. We do feel like, we could have a safe, socially distant pit stop like we do normally on West Main. We're hoping to maybe expand that to other different pit stops. and focusing, we obviously have a lot of people who are no longer commuting to work, but, encouraging people to get out and ride their bike to the pit stop and ride back to their home to, telecommute or whatever they're doing from their home. So that's something that we are going to be looking towards. I know Parks is going to be offering free bike rentals out at Dardental Park. So there's opportunities there. The city often puts out PSAs and a press release and things like that. So we'll continue to do that as well. And then I'll turn it over to Kyle to talk about Bike to School Day.
So just kind of like Amanda said about how Bike to Work Day is kind of like a mainstay flagship day. Bike to School Day is also that. I don't think it's as high profile as Bike to Work Day because we're not really setting up pit stops on Main Street for 8-year-olds to stop at. But kind of what Bike to School Day is, well, at least what we're going to push for this year is basically kind of like a welcoming committee. So a pit stop at a school. So like an incentive for kids to ride to school. And then there'll be some schools that will do like hey, meet at this parking lot or this area of town, and then we're all going to ride it together. But that's kind of a school by school basis. So we're kind of counting on the PTOs to kind of go into that. We also talked about trying to get maybe some city councilors riding with groups into school. But we haven't really reached out to them yet. I'm just looking at my list here from that meeting. The other thing that we're gonna look into is see if Cambic, the Charlottesville Area Mountain Bike Club, who does a lot of trail work in town, if they have any trail work days that they want to add in the calendar or projects that they're chomping at the bit to do that we can kind of advertise. And then also at the schools, I'm going to get in touch with the Bridge, the arts organization, about maybe doing like kids making their own bike maps. So kind of a la that desire lines that Peter was talking about in the chat, kind of which way they might take to school, and maybe we can kind of hang those up somewhere or something like that. And past that, that's really everything that I have that's kind of concrete. Everything else is really just a vague brainstorm that's on my phone here. But I think what the Bike Month calendar is trying to do is trying to, at least in one regard, just collect everything that every organization is doing that's bike related in town and put it into one place to kind of have this universal kind of one map kind of feel to the calendar so that it's all available to everybody.
Great. Are you guys looking for any volunteers for any of these activities or any collaborators?
I mean, we certainly will be, but I don't think we're there at a point where we can put out a call for volunteers. I think there's always, if somebody has an idea that they are interested in sort of organizing, certainly at this point, if you're interested in volunteering to organize an event to add to the calendar, we'd love to hear from you. But as far as like helping to staff like a pit stop or a welcome station, I don't know that we're quite there yet.
Great. So when you guys are, what I'm offering to do is I will put out anyone who wants to make a call for volunteers. I can put out an email to all of the people who are on our email list for this group, which includes our bike and ped count volunteers. So people, we can send things out that way. And then one more question for you guys was, if people have things that they want to add to the calendar, should they email you directly, Amanda? How would they get stuff on the calendar?
I'm gonna let Peter answer that. I think he was trying to organize a calendar. He's got some other things that he's working on too. I guess in the absence right now of a Google Calendar, which is what we're shooting for, if you've got ideas and want to email them to me, feel free. But Peter, go for it.
Yeah, so I'm in the process right now of setting up a Google Calendar that will be accessible to the public. It's a work in progress, but I'll put the link in the chat. I mean, I literally created this thing 1 minute ago, so absolutely nothing is on it, but we can begin populating it. Okay, so sorry, my two chat items ran together. PC's hosting this guy, Ralph Bueller, for a event about his new book, Cycling for Sustainable Cities. I'm asking you all to help me pick a date. Okay, so that's one chat item. The other link that you see in the chat is a link for the new Google Calendar, which we can go ahead and put the basic things on there, like bike to school day, for example. Yeah, and then the other thing is to build on the bike to work day item, PC is going to host some kind of swag station. I just talked to the folks at C3, the Climate Collaborative. They also are considering putting together a swag station. And this also is related to some of the other things we've been talking about, changing the definition of what is transportation. So perhaps these swag stations might not necessarily be like a 8:30 a.m. thing on West Main Street, but thinking about like bike there rather than bike to work day. There's lots of ways to travel on a bike, lots of places. Most places are not the workplace, actually. So we could think, more broadly that way. Let's see here.
Anything else you wanted to share about PEC's work, Peter?
That was all for now. Thank you.
Great.
As
Dan,
all of the Bike Month stuff is happening, sorry, Jessica, please feel free to shoot all of the information over to me at Rideshare. We are happy to promote. If you see a way that we can partner, I'm open to discussions about that. There are some things that we have the ability to do with rideshare, since biking is obviously an alternative commute method. So we would love to be included, or at least promote what you're doing.
One other thing in this room, I could have said it to Amanda privately, but you may want to check in with Jay Heitman and see if he wants to do a ride of silence.
great, thanks, Peter. Dan, is the county doing anything? Do you want to talk about that?
I was just touching base with our communications department and Parks and Rec. I don't have anything set in stone right now. I know planning doesn't have any planned programs, but I mean, we would definitely be collaborating internally with other departments, and I'm just not 100% on what they are right now.
It's worth pointing out that the city's bike rental, where the bikes are free, is actually in the county. It's at Darden Tal Park.
Thanks, Peter. Patrick and Bill, is the university doing anything for Bike Month? I know you guys are going to be wrapping up the school year, but I'll still ask.
Parking and transportation doesn't have anything set in stone right now. Unfortunately, I missed the meeting earlier this week, the discussion regarding Bike Month, but we want to get involved though, but just nothing to promote as of this moment, but I'll certainly share it with the group when there is something.
Patrick and everyone who was in the meeting, I did send an email early on in this email or in this meeting, and there were a couple of things that I had ideas for you all for, possibly like hosting, also being a pit stop host. UVA has done that in the past. I don't know if that's something you might be interested in doing again. So just take a look at that and shoot me an email. Let me know what you think.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Max, did
yeah.
you want to talk about? Oh, go ahead, Bill. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Not really related to Bike Month. I think I may have mentioned here in a different meeting that we were looking into potentially more at the end of April when the students were still around. We had a student group that was interested in kind of closing off half of McCormick Road for an afternoon as a demonstration project, opening it to bikes and peds just exclusively. We hit some roadblocks in terms of whether that would be an event, and the university is really trying to not do stuff like that right now. So I think we're going to table that till the fall. Just wanted to give that update. And I mean, if Cavman, I just saw in the chat, I mean, if he can ride a horse, I'm sure he can ride a bike, or she. I don't know if it's, you never know who's under the mask. So
maybe we can get some Cavalier to ride some kids to school.
Great. Max, you were at that Bike Month planning meeting. You want to talk a little bit about what Pocosito is doing?
Well, actually, I mean, the initial idea from my side was to go with something akin to the Ride of Silence, but differently, more as a parade. But with how things are evolving, it seems very uncertain that we should have a gathering in a way for May for bigger group riding together. So we explored different options now, including, having like staggered or virtual tours, but this is still very early in the beginning of if and how we can do this, that it's still offering the benefits. So basically the main idea of having a parade would be more next year, not this year. Hoping that next year really this is over. So of course, but yeah, that's basically it. So I would definitely support the other activities, but I think the parade idea can't be maintained this year.
Sarah, is there anything else you want to add about anything ride shares, planning, or anything?
We don't have any specific Bike Month stuff necessarily coming up for us, but like I said, we're very open to any partnerships or any promotion that we can do. We have a lot of telework events that will be happening around that time, but definitely still looking to do some bike promotion as well.
Great, thanks. So as a little bit of a wrap up, it sounds like try to add your events, whatever they are, to the Google Calendar that Peter is creating. If you need volunteers or if you want help advertising your event, please reach out to me and I'll share things with Sarah and we'll get things on social media and out to our email lists. I think that's everything. I see Lonnie has had his hand up for a little while. Lonnie, I want to give you a chance to ask questions or add if you know of any additional activities for Bike Month.
I don't.
Great. Are there any other comments or questions or anything else anyone is thinking of before we wrap up our meeting?
I do have a more general thing to mention. As was referenced, I brought up to the Board of Supervisors an issue with rural road pavings and some of the ways that that process works now. The running and cycling community is not explicitly notified when roads are put on the paving list. And that's a problem because if you look at the paving list right now, 3 of the most highly used roads for running in the county are on that paving list. I suspect some of those are also used by cyclists. Coles Rolling Road is one being paved right now that was highly used. When that came up in the discussion, when the public brought that up to the Board of Supervisors, even citizens who were proposing for it to be paved said things like, "Oh, we see mountain bikers on this road all the time. We need to pave this to make it safer for them," which is just crazy. And so I don't know how to go about this, but it would be really nice to find a way if we could encourage localities to include, we have all these great local clubs, the Charlottesville Track Club, Charlottesville Area Trail Runners Club, Cambic. It just seems like it'd be, the Farm Bureau is routinely notified for anything having to do with rural areas. It just seems like there should be some better way of notifying these local organizations that this is something being proposed.
I'll respond to that. That's specifically a county thing with our rural areas. And I definitely am aware of your concerns. I see it, but with this is a policy within the county. So I would encourage you to keep this conversation going with your supervisor. And it will allow us to continue to evaluate our process. Right now, roads are submitted for paving by requests property owners, and they can be removed by board members or another request by property owners. And so we do need to have this conversation, but I definitely we could reevaluate our approach on this. We do hold two public meetings every spring towards these roads, and so there is opportunities for input that way as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think just in terms of general awareness, I mean, when I've mentioned to the public, and I try to get the word out to people myself as one lone individual, people, it's buried in language like 6-year secondary road priority, and people's eyes glaze over and they don't realize that there's something on there that's important. So it's something that, people that do walk, run, and bike, they need to be aware that these paving lists exist, and that they can have big repercussions for our ability to be able to exercise, our ability to get from here to there, and so forth. And I don't know what the best answer is there. And I'm sure we can't be the only locality that's affected by this. I know that in Loudoun County, it's also a huge issue being brought up. Some of those roads that are identified as highly used by runners are not in Albemarle. They're in adjacent counties. So this is a bigger issue than just Albemarle in terms of people understanding the importance of these roads.
Right, I agree. I'm definitely familiar with how it's being handled in Loudoun County. But again, these roads to be taken off or to be put on a list is through a member and through public comment and property owners who have the abilities of requesting for these roads. So I do encourage the conversation going and allow us to evaluate our process as well. It'll be going back to the board in May for hearing.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks for that question, Lonnie, and for all of your feedback, Dan. I think all of the outlets Dan gave you for making comments are probably the best way to go about it, but I'll also make you aware that we do have a Rural Transportation Advisory Committee that meets every other month. Lonnie, I can reach out to you offline and give you that information. That might be another place for you to discuss this item. I want to wrap things up, but before we do, are there any other comments, questions, any other requests for agenda items for next month? If not, I want to thank all of you so much for joining us today. I hope we'll see you all again next month. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, see you.